MSW Media.
The rule of law is not just some lawyer's turn of phrase. It is the very foundation of our democracy. The essence of the rule of law is that like cases are treated alike. That there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, one rule for the powerful, another for the powerless, one rule for the rich and another for the poor, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity. To serve as Attorney General at this critical time is a calling I am honored and eager to answer.
So now it's clean up on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be clean up on aisle 45.
Welcome to episode 195 of Cleanup on Aisle 45. It's Wednesday, October 16th, 2024. I'm Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Strzok. We've got a lot to cover today, including, guess who, Rudy Giuliani and his latest attempt to block Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss from enforcing judgment on their $148 million defamation ruling. And Moss and Freeman get a settlement in their lawsuit against Gateway Pundit.
Yes, and it's interesting, too. We aren't real sure of the terms of the settlement, but one of them is pretty public, so we'll talk about that. And then, of course, the Eric Adams administration. Apparently, one of his aides has been charged with witness tampering. I was wondering when the obstruction charges would start happening, and now they are. But first, we do have some new patrons to thank. New patrons of Cleanup on Aisle 45, including Phyllis Frank, A, Barbara Altman, Spork Bender, love that, Heidi Molnar, and Cindy M. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for supporting independent media. If you want to become a patron and get these episodes early and ad-free and access to the super sweary bonus episodes, you can do that by going to patreon.com/aisle45pod. That's AISLE 45POD. And speaking of extra sweary bonus episodes, thank you, Pete, for taking the keys to the show last week while I was on vacation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries at all. You come back to the joint, they're like two monkeys running around the kitchen with a colander and a couple of knives and tiger in the living room. It's like a, what is that? The movie with the bachelor party or hangover or whatever the hell it is, but, only in podcast form.
Or
only
forums, or yeah,
exactly. Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Well,
it was great. Thank you for covering, and I really do appreciate it. And I figured, if you helped run the cybersecurity counterintelligence shit over at the FBI for a while, that we probably handle Cleanup on Aisle 45 pod. So I appreciate you, and I know everybody else did. We got tons of feedback on your bonus episode. Somebody was like, I'm already 10 motherfuckers deep in this episode.
It's a little salty. There's a lot of salt to go around this last week.
So I know we don't do too much swearing on the public episode, but there were a lot of MRFers in that one. So thank you again, and thanks to everybody for giving me a week off there. I really needed it. And now we're like 20 days, not like it's so soon. The election is so soon, and so much is depending on this election. And, there's a million things, but mostly it's the ability to hold Donald Trump accountable. That's what this, if he wins, there won't be any of that. So we have to all make sure we get out and vote. I don't think we have anybody listening to this program that's going to have a problem with that. But anyway, let's start with Rudy. I know we usually save Rudy for the last segment, but this was an interesting court filing. Rudy wants to postpone some of his judgment collection from Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss. So he's filed a motion asking the court to use its discretion to do so. And he says, defendant Rudolph W. Giuliani, defendant, respectfully submits this memorandum of law in opposition to plaintiff's motion to enforce their judgment. Here, the court should exercise its discretion to make the following orders. First, plaintiff seeks relief with respect to 5 categories of property. And let's start with the Florida condominium. Rudy says this property is the subject of a separate action and, presently, a motion for summary judgment. Defendant will file papers in opposition on October 16th, 2024, as scheduled by the court. Then on to the New York co-op apartment. For many months, stretching back to the bankruptcy case, plaintiffs have known about and supported the defendant's efforts to sell his apartment. Indeed, as plaintiffs acknowledge in this motion, the bankruptcy court authorized the defendant to retain Sotheby's as a real estate broker. Plaintiffs, however, now take the position that the defendant does not have the incentive to maximize the sale price. This contention is meritless. Defendant will obtain restitution upon reversal of plaintiff's judgment by the D.C. Circuit. Defendant, on that appeal, has numerous meritorious arguments, as shown in his opening brief to the D.C. Circuit filed October 2nd. Defendant therefore has an incentive to maximize the sale price because he has a restitution interest in that price. Nevertheless, defendant now seeks to moot further litigation regarding his incentives. The defendant therefore consents to the appointment of a receiver to effect the sale of the New York apartment. So that's New York and Florida. He didn't repeat any of his numerous, quote, meritorious arguments here because he does not really actually have numerous meritorious arguments. But that's what he is referring to in this particular filing.
Yeah, but he doesn't stop there, right? This is where it gets interesting. The filing continues. Defendant's alleged claim against the Trump campaign. The court, in its discretion, should postpone a turnover of this claim until November 6, 2024, the day after Election Day. Otherwise, plaintiffs will or may use this assignment for an improper political or at least collateral purpose, creating the confusing and inaccurate appearance that defendant is now somehow suing candidate Trump, thereby generating an accompanying and unnecessary media frenzy. Plainly, the value of this claim will not depreciate between now and November 6, 2024. Then, yeah, everything. It is like the Middle Eastern peace process for the past 50 years. There is always something. There is always some event. There is always an occurrence on the horizon that you need to stop and wait for, because otherwise you might lose every opportunity for something. But, Rudy then goes on to talk about his unique personal property, kind of a metaphorical 2 turntables and a microphone. Quoting again, plaintiff's papers identify numerous items of unique personal property, which fall into 3 subcategories. First, some of the personal property has a level of public interest. Plaintiffs identify, for example, a great many wristwatches. Plaintiff's list, however, includes, for example, a watch gifted to defendant by the President of France for defendant's unprecedented public service in response to the 9/11 attacks. The list also includes a watch similarly gifted to defendant by the President of Italy. With respect to such property, the defendant asks that the court, in its discretion under CPLR Section 5240, couple a turnover receivership order with an order that a receiver hold the property at issue but not sell it until after the D.C. Circuit rules on defendant's expedited appeal. If this kind of unique property is sold and monetized, but the D.C. Circuit reverses the judgment, restitution can never be adequate. It is hard to think that the market price for items like these will materially depreciate between now and a decision by the D.C. Circuit.
So don't sell my watches and get the money.
My watches, my stuff. My stuff is special stuff. My watch, it is special stuff, unlike everybody else who might be subject to bankruptcy proceedings and be ultimately, ordered to turn this over to sell. My stuff is special. I am special. I am a privileged white man, and I need privileged white treatment for my stuff.
I guess I think his point here, correct me if I'm wrong, is if you sell these watches and give Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss the money, and then the D.C. Circuit decides that I don't owe them any money in the appeal, then I can't ever get these watches back. And so therefore they should just be held until the D.C. Circuit rules on my appeal. Is that kind of where he's going?
Right.
With this?
Or at least, and I guess I can see some of the logic to it, that you'd never be able to buy it back. Right. So if you get like a 1978 Rolex, is a 1978 Rolex, you can sell that and presumably go out. And even if you can't get the exact same 1978 Rolex, you can get a similar Rolex. But if somebody buys a gift from the president of France, they can sit there and buy it for $20,000. And then if it turns out that Rudy, the judgment is reduced and he goes to get that watch back because that watch was the one from the president of France, and the person who bought it says, no, if you want this back, you're going to have to pay me $50,000. So it's not, it's the idea these things are unique, or that's the argument he's making. But at this point, I don't really care. Maybe you should have not so abused your position of trust and authority and abused your reputation that you built over the span of a career to, just defame these people, right?
Right.
To maybe that should have crossed your mind when you were engaging in your bad acts, rather than sitting here now saying, I'm not going to get my watch back that the premier of or Prime Minister of Italy got. But I don't care, Rudy. I really don't care. I don't care. Shouldn't if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. And in this case, if the time is your little personal watch collection, tough. It's aggravating. And then he continues, right? We talked about 3 categories. So the filing continues. Second, some of the property can be characterized as collectibles. This subcategory includes, for example, sports memorabilia, as well as a 1980 Mercedes automobile previously owned by Lauren Bacall.
Oh.
Again, sports memorabilia and a classic car can be priced and sold, but restitution and money would not make defendant truly whole. Again, defendant asked the court to couple a turnover receivership order with an order that a receiver hold the property at issue, but not sell it until after the D.C. Circuit rules on defendant's expedited appeal.
Yeah. Now, this is one of the things that, when they won their $148 million settlement, I'm like, it's going to take years to collect on this. And these are the reasons why, right? Because you're going to file appeals. You're going to have receivers hold all this stuff before it can be sold because it can't be bought back, presumably. And, these kinds of awards often take years and years to get paid from. And again, this is one of the reasons why, because you have a privileged person with unlimited ability to have legal help, even though all of his lawyers are suing him because he hasn't paid them. But presumably people of wealth and means have the ability to file these lengthy, appeals that take forever. Now this appeal is expedited, but as we know, as we've been following many cases for a very long time, even expedited appeals take a long time. So that's kind of why we were, when this award initially happened, it's why we kind of warned, like, it's going to be a while. There's going to be a bankruptcy case, and then there's going to be hearings, and then there's going to be receiverships. And then, a lot of folks are like, well, then immediately after that, Shaye Moss and Ruby Freeman will be able to go and seize all this property. But then, of course, you're going to get motions to hold off on that, either because, hey, everybody says I'm suing Donald Trump because he owes me money, but I'm totally not. But I kind of am. And I don't think that that's something that we should talk about before the election. So let's talk about that after. And then even after that, we should wait until, my appeal is heard from the D.C. Circuit and goes up to the Supreme Court, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just delay, right? I mean, that's all it is. It's all it's designed to do. And people who have money and means are the ones who are able to delay these kinds of awards from being paid out, essentially. And so that's kind of why we are at the place we are. But then the third subcategory of personal items, some of the property includes family heirlooms and items of sentimental value. For example, this category includes a wristwatch that belonged to the defendant's grandfather and namesake, Rodolfo Giuliani. Defendant inherited the watch from his father. The watch may fetch little on the market, but it has great sentimental and intangible value for the defendant and his heirs. Again, it is hard to think that the market price for an item will materially depreciate between now and a decision by the D.C. Circuit, exempting family. And he's actually citing a ruling here, a law, CPLR section 5205A2, that exempts family pictures and portraits. He's trying to apply his, I guess, grandfather's watch to that category. And again, defendant asked the court to couple a turnover receivership order with an order that the receiver should hold the property at issue but not sell it until the D.C. Circuit rules on the expedited appeal. So again, we now have a watch that apparently has very little monetary value, but is very important to Rudy Giuliani, doesn't want to sell it until his appeal is heard. And so, again, asking the judge, hang on to these items, hang on to my Lauren Bacall Mercedes-Benz, hang on to my, Prime Minister of Italy watch gift until the DC Circuit Court of Appeals says, F you, we're not lowering this, or even if we do lower it, like his items all total are still not going to equal what he owes. Like even if they cut the award in half, Pete, he's still not going to be able to come up with all of the money by selling all this stuff. But he just wants it on hold. He wants it in a receivership until the higher courts tell him that he's lost his appeal, which is what is going to happen.
Yeah, and it's clearly, first thing, I'm all for whatever the courts normally do. If this is routine practice that any debtor can invoke these sorts of arguments and win successfully, then fine. Extend those to Rudy Giuliani. I suspect, like you, that most people don't have the ability to draw out litigation like this and filing after filing. I would note, too, that this is, his little precious son, Andrew, argued in court papers also, I think, last week, that the rings from
his World Series rings. Right?
World Series ring, Yankee World Series rings from 96, 98, 99, 2000 were gifts to him from his father and shouldn't be turned over. So all the little vultures in their form of like mine, precious. It's like Gollum with a damn ring that, Andrew is trying to get his hands on so that those aren't turned over. And at some point it's somehow appropriate that Rudy's estate is being picked apart and fought over while he's still alive. I guess is kind of a more satisfying public spectacle than waiting until he passes away and his estate goes to probate. But is it just the reason that judgment was so high is because of Rudy Giuliani's stature. I went to the trial, one day of the trial in D.C. and sat there during the time that the expert for Shaye Moss and Ruby Freeman went on the stand and was talking about how to think about the valuation of the damage that was done to them. And a huge portion of that was looking at the reach of the things that Rudy Giuliani says. When he says something, when he puts it up on social media, when he talks about it on a podcast, the reach of that, when it's retweeted by people in and around Trump. It's not you or me. Well, that's probably not a fair comparison because we have, podcasts too and social media accounts, but an average person going out and saying something defamatory about somebody isn't going to get the reach of what Rudy Giuliani saying it does. And so guess what? If that is how you're going to choose to abuse your power, then the punishment should be consequently greater. And I don't care if the car belonged to Lauren Bacall. What did you date Lauren Bacall? Is Lauren Bacall your mother? Was Lauren Bacall, did you have posters? Was she your guiding star that motivated you through law school? Other than saying, oh, it's neat, Lauren Bacall on this car. I don't care. I don't care. Sell it. Turn it over. Auction it off. At this point, it's October of 2024. The things you were saying about them were, guess what? During the last presidential election of 2020, enough. Get it done. I have so little sympathy for this pathetic husk of a man. I struggle to put it into words.
Yeah, no, same. And I think, I do think though, and we'll let you know what the judge says here, but I do think they might grant receivership and an order to hold these things until the appeal is done. But we'll see. We'll see what they say. You also have to weigh the idea of deterrence. Like that's why the award, one of the reasons, like you said, the reach of Rudy Giuliani, but also one of the reasons of the like how much money is it going to take to get you to shut up? It's kind of like Alex Jones, right? Like what will it take? And of course, he weaseled his way out of having to pay $1.5 billion by being able to, sell his InfoWars domains and at a low price and hand over everything that he quote unquote owns at this particular point, and then just start up all over again, spending $80,000 a month on whatever, So I have very little sympathy for these folks too. I feel like those rules about receivership and that should apply to people who are, who don't have this kind of money, don't have this kind of resources and lawyers to keep fighting this thing as long as they can and preventing these just awards to go to the victims of these crimes, which, obviously this isn't a criminal case, it's a civil case, but, the victims. So something else that happened with Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss, Gateway Pundit was sued by them because they published like over 20 articles full of lies, including the Rudy stuff about them. And last week, Gateway Pundit settled before they went to trial. And while we don't know really what's in the settlement, Gateway Pundit published a statement on their website about this. They said Georgia officials concluded that there was no widespread voter fraud by election workers who counted ballots at the State Farm Arena in November 2020. The results of this investigation indicate that Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss did not engage in ballot fraud or criminal misconduct while working at State Farm Arena on election night. And it goes on to say a legal matter with this news organization and the two election workers has been resolved to the mutual satisfaction of the parties through a fair and reasonable settlement. So obviously part of the settlement there, Pete, is they had to go on public on their website and say Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss did nothing wrong and there was no outcome determinative voter fraud in the state of Georgia, particularly no ballot stuffing or whatever the hell they were accusing Shaye Moss, like vials of cocaine passing around. Well, Rudy calls them USB ports. They're actually drives, not ports. But still,
the cyber czar, Trump's cyber czar, by the way.
Oh, right. You can't really pass around a port. But anyway, regardless, absolutely defamatory stuff happening on Gateway Pundit. And now they have had to come out and say none of it was true. Absolutely none of it was true. So that's clearly part of this settlement. I don't know what if there was a monetary part of this settlement, I'm sure there was, but we don't know the amount.
Yeah, I've got to think there was. I mean, I think an apology just on its own wouldn't be sufficient for them to settle. And I think the case to me appeared to be pretty strong. So it's so sad. Again, much like Rudy Giuliani, satisfying when you think about, for those of you who are fortunate enough not to know the Gateway Pundit, it is amongst, in my opinion, the most sleazy, corrupt, just full of disinformation, specifically designed to sow discontent and churn up hatred towards anything non-MAGA. And it could not, and in my opinion, Jim Hoft, a piece of human garbage, could this judgment or agreement couldn't come at a better time. And I hope, and there's always some question about like, who's actually funding this? Where's the funding coming from? Where's the support coming from? Is there a foreign intelligence linked to any of this directly or indirectly? Like we saw, the Tim Pools and the Benny Johnsons of the world. Is, Jim Hoft happily sitting on top of tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of Russian money to sow and spew divisive content in the United States? We don't know, but it is certainly the type of outlet. And I think what was interesting, kind of pivoting a little bit to the charging papers surrounding the Russians that were indicted for this disinformation effort, there was some information about how the U.S. government had information that the Russians were monitoring. I think it was several hundred, if not more, sites that they thought were sort of content creators that they agreed with or supported. And then there were some that they didn't. But I would be very surprised if people like Jim Hoft aren't on the sort of Russian, yay, this is one of our guys list. Not saying that they're paying him, but just that at a minimum, these are things and accounts
he's a friendly,
right, they view as friendly. So again, congratulations. The walking piece of garbage is Jim Hoft and his publication, The Gateway Pundit. Couldn't have happened to nicer people, appropriately so. Because again, this isn't like, we can negotiate something. It was so bad that they decided, in addition to this, just rubbing the crap on the nose of Jim Hoft and the Gateway Pundit, that whatever the case was so strong, they would rather do that than go to trial. So that ought to tell you some idea of the strength of what Shaye Moss and Ruby Freeman were sitting on, and good for them.
Right. And not only do you then abate the cost of a trial, but you abate the potential huge settlement that you probably can't afford that would likely be awarded by a jury. So they've settled. So that's good. And this apology, I'm glad it's up there. It's on Gateway Pundit. They had to put it on their own website. And so if we find out what the dollar amount is, we'll let you know, and keep an eye on the additional lawsuits by Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss. So good for them. All right, we have more to get to. We have to talk about the Eric Adams administration in New York, but we have to take a quick break. So everybody stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. We have more new patrons to thank, including BF Hunter 2, Colleen, Nancy Clack, Nicole Wagner, and Christina Talley. Thank all of you so much for your support. Thank you for giving us the ability to put this together, to get this news out that you wouldn't find in one place anywhere else, and really value your joining the team. So thank you. And with that, let's head up to New York to the show that never ends to talk about the Eric Adams administration investigations. This is from the Washington Post. A former city official under Mayor Eric Adams was arrested Tuesday and charged with witness tampering and destruction of records as part of a federal probe into alleged illegal contributions solicited on the mayor's behalf during his last campaign. Mohammed Bahi appeared before a magistrate judge in the afternoon and was released on a $250,000 bond, which he is expected to post within a week. Bahi recently resigned as a community liaison focused on serving members of New York's Muslim population. He previously had a role in Adams's 2021 campaign. Bahi's charges landed less than 2 weeks after the mayor pleaded not guilty in federal court to charges of bribery and taking foreign donations. Bahi, 40, and his attorney declined to comment after his court appearance.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this. There's got to be witness tampering, obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence because of all these wellness checks by the NYPD on the fundraiser lady and the the calls made immediately to Erica Adams from people who were being searched, and calls. I think she was on the phone with Eric Adams while the cops were knocking on her door. So like a lot of this the chickens have to come home to roost on this. And so let's continue the story here. Federal prosecutors said in the criminal complaint against Bahi that a handful of illegal donors to the 2021 Adams campaign have cooperated in the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's investigation into the mayor, hoping to receive leniency for their misdeeds. Adams has been charged with taking bribes from representatives from Turkey, including from at least one government official. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan alleges that in return, of course, we know this, he fast-tracked a fire department safety inspection for the Turkish consular building, a structure that should not have passed fire inspection at the time. The mayor also is accused of soliciting and accepting straw donations from a New York businessman who poured cash into the candidate's campaign in the names of his employees. Bahi is alleged to have participated in that effort and later to have tried to cover it up. Adams, as we know, has pled not guilty and has resisted calls for his resignation. As he continues to serve, a number of high-ranking City Hall officials have departed. They've left, some of whom are also being investigated in various matters. So what are these new charges about, Pete? Witness tampering, right?
Yeah, so a criminal complaint filed by prosecutors said that Bahi deleted Signal, an encrypted communications app, from his phone as investigators were outside his home and trying to get in to execute a search warrant.
Oh.
And then, before continuing, it's a little interesting that it was a complaint, right? So if you're going to charge somebody in most any system, but certainly in the federal system, you can go two ways broadly. There's an information, which we're not going to dive into because it gets too complicated. Big two ways are you're either going to go to a grand jury, you present information to a grand jury, you present them a charging document and they vote on it. And if they it's called returning a true bill, that will say, yes, in fact, you've demonstrated there's probable cause to believe that somebody broke the law. And here's, an attached, you can go get an arrest warrant with that. The other way you do that is via complaint. And a complaint, there is no grand jury involvement, right? There's an agent who goes and swears out an affidavit before a federal judge. The judge looks at that and tells the agent, okay, yep, you've demonstrated there's probable cause. I find that there is, and gives you your warrant. There is, if you go via complaint, because you haven't had that involvement of a sort of, not an adversarial party, but an outside grand jury. If you don't follow that up with a grand jury indictment, you can have what's called, a probable cause hearing, but it goes in front of it becomes an adversarial process where the information that the government has can be sort of tested in front of the judge. Now, typically, the reason you get a complaint rather than a grand jury indictment is usually two big reasons. One, something happened very, very quickly and you need to get to or something is about to happen very quickly. You're worried somebody's going to leave the country, or you just heard that they're flying into the country, or they're just about to go destroy something or spend something.
Like we don't have time to go to a grand jury.
You don't have time to do it, right? And so you got to rush. You don't have time to get in front of the grand jury and recite all the stuff and get them to deliberate and return a true bill. So one is speed, right? You need something because time is of the essence. The other reason is, and particularly you see this a lot in public corruption cases, you do see it a lot in some, particularly espionage crimes, you're worried about whether or not the grand jury is going to leak the information or what they're going to talk about it with their friends, with their family, with somebody in the media. And it's interesting to me in this case that, because we've seen before indictments returned, not, I don't know if entirely for all these Eric Adams cases, but there have been indictments rather than complaints. But this was a complaint. And so it will be curious if we ever get an explanation about why federal prosecutors decided they needed to move on complaint rather than grand jury indictment in Bahi's case. Now,
well, with witness tampering, I mean, that's usually pretty urgent.
Yeah, and I don't know if they figured, okay, there are people potentially who would be sympathetic into the community, because we'll talk a little bit about
or he could destroy more evidence if we don't get him now.
Right. And so we don't know what he was doing. But, in addition to certainly deleting Signal, as his investigators were outside his home trying to get in, right? So it wasn't just like, oh, I saw Eric got indicted, there's other searches going down. Literally, investigators outside his house, he's looking out the window or doing whatever he's doing feverishly, like deleting stuff on his phone as they are trying to get in. Now, he also allegedly had conversations with the businessman who allegedly made illegal donations to Adams, advising him to lie to the FBI.
So this is the guy who in the Eric Adams indictment, there was an Eric Adams employee who that they talked about that spoke to this businessman who donated $10,000, $2,000 a piece for his employees, reimbursed him, and that this Adams employee or staffer told this guy to lie to the FBI. So that's what this is. That's why when we read that indictment, we're like, there's going to be more indictments. And here it is.
Yeah, right. And he's the owner of a Brooklyn construction company, as you said, hasn't been named. And the thing about the $10,000 the donation is like an individual contributor can only contribute a maximum of $2,000. So he's already been doing stuff. But again, advising somebody to lie to the FBI is never a good idea. Now, how did he get to the $10,000 if $2,000 is the maximum cap? Well, the company owner he reimbursed 4 of his employees for their $2,000 infusions to the mayor's campaign, attempting to circumvent the law on donation limits, right? So 2,000 times 4 gets you to 8. His personal 2 gets you the total of 10. In the complaint against Bahi, officials said all 5 of the contributors cooperated. All 5. And the information they've given has proven credible and is corroborated by other evidence.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Prosecutors have suggested Bahi was a go-between for Adams and the businessman around the time the construction executive's home was searched back in June. He conveyed to the business owner that Adams, quote, believed that the businessman would not cooperate with law enforcement, according to the complaint.
And that's also in Eric Adams' indictment as well.
Yeah. And so he faces, based on these 20 years in prison on each of the 2 counts he's charged with. The judge overseeing Adams's case has a conference scheduled for Wednesday to discuss the possible incorporation of classified records in pretrial proceedings, but it will be closed to the public.
Good old SEPA. And it says here that Manhattan U.S. Attorney Damian Williams said at a press briefing on the Adams indictment last month that more individuals would likely be charged. Quote, the charges unsealed today should leave no doubt about the seriousness of any effort to interfere with a federal investigation, particularly when undertaken by a government employee. That's what he said in a statement on Tuesday about the Bahi case. Now, Adams praised Bahi's work at a news conference on Tuesday, referring to him as an important figure in the Muslim community. Adams denied that he was tied to the effort to skirt campaign donation limits. All 5 of the contributors are cooperating. All 5 of them are cooperating. So denying that he's tied to these efforts is pretty ridiculous. He also denies that he tried to prevent anyone from cooperating. Quote, I would never instruct anyone to do anything illegal or improper. The only instruction I give people all the time is follow the law. That's what Eric Adams said. I just thought I'd throw that quote out there for you. So that's where we are with that. And, I do want to talk a little bit more about all the different criminal investigations in this Adams administration universe. But we do have to take a quick break. So we're running short on time here in this block. So we're going to talk about that after a word from our sponsor. Please stand by and we'll see you on the other side. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. We have more new patrons to thank, including MCAT, Diane Fujimoto, Susan Wright, Tina Luna, and B. Kaz. Thank you so much for supporting us here at Cleanup on Aisle 45. We really appreciate it. And you'd think, Pete, that an entire segment like the B Block would be enough to cover the Eric Adams news, but it's not. CBS has this story. The New York Times is reporting a fifth investigation into possible corruption in Mayor Eric Adams' administration. The published report says the Manhattan DA's office has opened a probe that involves the mayor's chief advisor, Ingrid Lewis Martin, and 4 others. The new investigation reportedly involves the city's leasing of commercial properties. In late September, Lewis Martin's cell phone was seized when she landed at JFK International Airport after a trip to Japan, and her home in East Flatbush was searched. In a statement, Lewis Martin's attorney called the searches baseless. They aren't. And said, quote, in due time, all the facts will come out and will be supported by the evidence and demonstrate everything was done properly. That's not going to happen. I do agree that in due time, all the facts will come out and will be supported by the evidence, but I think it'll demonstrate everything was done improperly. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and it's just staggering because one, not only was there this huge amount of alleged apparent crime going on, but they were also doing it in such a sloppy way that it's not that all of this is getting wrapped up. I mean, it's not like there was one sort of an illegal act and you're sure about that and you suspect there might have been all kinds of like surrounding sort of smoke here and there. But no, all of these. So let's go over let's step back and go over all of the investigations, right? So following a federal investigation, Adams was indicted on September 26 and pled not guilty to charges of bribery, wire fraud, and conspiracy to solicit a contribution from a foreign national. The indictment alleges Adams accepted illegal campaign donations. Now, meanwhile, sources say an investigation involving former New York City Police Commissioner Edward Caban and his twin brother, James Caban, is related to allegations James worked as a fixer for restaurants and nightclubs that were having trouble with the NYPD. Sources told CBS News New York that investigation is unrelated to Adams's indictment. Edward Caban, the former NYPD commissioner, not the twin brother, he resigned as police commissioner after federal agents searched his home and seized his phone. Now, an investigation into former deputy mayor for public safety, Philip Banks III, reportedly involves his brother, Terrence Banks, who runs a firm that represents companies that have contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars with a number of city agencies. So as I read this, Allison, what goes through my head again and again and again is that goofy Eric Adams public service announcement where he's telling you how to search your child's bedroom for something, a popular knapsack with many different locations, which
bullets behind the
could hide something as simple as a crack pipe. Behind this family photo, bullets.
I still think that the nightclub thing is like they're serving underage people and having underage dancers or something. And
yeah, some sex trafficking wouldn't surprise me.
Yep. Like I just keep like The Sopranos just keeps popping into my head. Right now, we have some reports about the investigation's toll on the city of New York and the investigations unit.
Who's running it?
Yeah,
that might be the first toll.
It says the City Department of Investigation's staffing levels are now so low that employees can't go on vacation without significant disruptions to the agency's work. There's so many investigations that they can't take vacations. A problem that's becoming especially dire amid various corruption probes into Mayor Adams' administration. And that's according to a letter obtained by the New York Daily News, by the way. A letter sent September 30th by Manhattan Councilwoman Gail Brewer to City Budget Chief Jacques Giha notes that DOI had 370 employees in the 2021 fiscal year, the last cycle under ex-mayor Bill de Blasio's administration. The current 2025 fiscal year, the agency, by the way, which functions as the city's government's internal corruption watchdog, only has 283. So we've gone from 370 to 283. That's a 24% staff reduction. And that's what the city councilwoman Brewer wrote, who's a Democrat. She chairs the council's oversight committee. Quote, DOI informed me on June 3rd, 2024, we simply do not have enough people to cover the amount of work that is necessary to support our ongoing investigations and criminal cases. That's what Brewer wrote. The need is so acute that DOI experiences significant disruptions when staff go on vacation. Among the probes the DOI has worked on is the investigation led by the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office that resulted in Eric Adams' indictment last month on criminal charges, alleging he took bribes and illegal campaign contributions from Turkish government operatives in exchange for political favors. So we have a unit, working with the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office that used to have 370 employees. Now it has 283. That's a quarter a reduction in staff, just about. And you've got all of these criminal investigations into the vast, illegal network of Eric Adams' administration. So you can't just talk about how, wow, we have 25% fewer staff members, but also we have 150% more investigations into this administration, and people can't go on, people can't take vacations. We need to bolster up the staffing of our investigative units because of the crime wave within the government.
Yeah. And look, it highlights another point that we've talked about in relation to Trump world, right? These cases, these crimes don't go on in a vacuum. So for every overworked New York City investigator, there is other crime. There are other investigations that are not being done simply because there aren't enough people to do it. So it's not the kind of thing that it's like, the Maytag repairman that, if all these people around Adams weren't doing crime, they'd just be sitting around doing nothing. There are other things out there that, but for all the crime in and around Eric Adams, might be getting investigated instead. But it's not, because all these people who aren't nearly enough, who have had, the 25% reduction and 24% staff reduction, they don't even have enough to cover the new crime coming in because of Eric Adams. And the parallel, of course, is Trump. It's not like all of the prosecutors working for Jack Smith and all the people supporting him out of the D.C. and, Florida U.S. attorney's offices and, the agents and analysts who are supporting him. It's not like they wouldn't have anything to do if it weren't for Trump's crime. The fact of the matter is that, A, not only are they working their butts off and probably don't have enough resources as is, there is other crime. There are other threats. There are other counterintelligence threats and public corruption threats and white-collar threats and gang violence and everything else that Donald Trump complains about that they can't do because the government, big government, U.S. government, state government, and Georgia state government, and New York state governments in Michigan, state governments in Arizona, state governments in Colorado have to devote prosecutors and investigators to investigate and prosecute the crime that Donald Trump enabled and encouraged around the 2020 elections. That's a cost that isn't talked about a lot. It's not really easy to see, but it's real and it's significant. And our communities are less safe because our law enforcement personnel and prosecutors have to focus on all this crap and crime around Donald Trump, and in the case of New York City, Eric Adams.
Yep. And Pete, there's something else I wanted to talk to you about on today's show, and that is this Eamon Bundy-style guy who was out hunting FEMA in North Carolina, and these horrible, violent people motivated by Donald Trump's rhetoric and, of course, always Russian-backed misinformation about disaster response and relief. But one more quick crime from Eric Adams, according to New Yorkers. He was seen wearing a baseball hat today with both a New York Yankees logo and a New York Mets logo, and they want him to be indicted just for that alone. So there's just thought I'd throw that in there. I've seen the baseball hat. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. So another potential crime committed by Mayor Eric Adams, who's trying to both sides the Mets Yankees series. So anyway, we'll talk about this person who was arrested for very serious threats to federal agents. But let's take one more quick break. Stick around, everybody. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. Thank you to the following new patrons. Terry, working to yeet his ass out of our lives. Laurie J. Wade. Jersey girls always remember to vote. Therese Grisham and Hallie. Thank all of you so much for your support. Thank you for being part of the team. It's humbling to have all of you supporting the work we do, and we simply couldn't do it without you.
Yeah, 100%. And Pete, this story, we did a quick hit on it on the Daily Beans, but I wanted to discuss it in depth with you because of your background in law enforcement. And this is from the Washington Post as well. A federal emergency response personnel directed employees operating Saturday in hard-hit Rutherford County, North Carolina, to stop working and move to a different area because of concerns over an armed militia threatening government workers in the region. And that's according to an email sent to federal agencies helping with hurricane response in the state. On Monday, the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office released a statement confirming that it had arrested an armed suspect for making threats against Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA employees, but had concluded that the suspect had acted alone and there was not truckloads of militia targeting relief workers, just this one guy. And we'll get into the details in a second. But Pete, I didn't see the FBI mentioned at all in this article or federal agents mentioned at all. This was a county sheriff that made this arrest based on what the Army, I believe, was reporting, which is obviously a federal agency. And I was wondering if you could talk about why you think that, if federal agents were targeted here, why the FBI wasn't brought in, or maybe they were and they're just not saying.
Yeah, it's hard to tell because I didn't see anything either. And that was a logical question about you've got federal officials who are being allegedly targeted and they are changing their behavior, right? They're moving out of certain areas and not doing their work because of these threats. And what we don't know is, all the things we don't know. So it could be the first thing that leaps to mind is this wasn't, if the media reporting is accurate, it was just one person. It wasn't a group of folks driving around. And it could be that the initial reports, whoever made them, exaggerated them. The FBI and local law enforcement actually did look into it, and instead of a militia running around, it was actually some knucklehead running around in his pickup truck. And it's like, okay, this is a local law enforcement matter because there's not some broader conspiracy. And two, the other thing is that it can be that in many cases, state and local charges are faster and as effective to bring against somebody. And so if you say, look, the local sheriff or whoever it is, state official can arrest him and prosecute him and get a, whatever the sentence is that he'd be facing, if that's equal to or greater than federal charges, and just let the locals do it. But there's a lot we don't know. And it does, it is interesting that, at least as I understand it from the media reporting, this was, it was National Guard folks, I think, who got reports of this and relayed it to federal officials. And yet another reminder that we all need to be particularly these last 3 weeks as we head to the elections. Mm-hmm. There is so much disinformation and misinformation running around across the spectrum. Be super careful as you're hearing things and reading things on social media. Check and double check and triple check whether it's a story, whether it's a picture, whatever it is. Just take a beat and figure out whether or not something is truly credible and accurate before you get happy, excited, upset, terrified, whatever your response is. A lot of people, including hostile state actors like Russia, are going to town in this space, thanks in no small part to Elon Musk absolutely taking off all controls of Twitter and, throwing his entire weight behind electing Donald Trump. But just, it is important, especially now, especially in the final home stretch, just to be careful about what we're saying and repeating and assuming to be true or false, because, this is a good example of it. But short answer, don't know. Don't know whether I'm willing to bet the FBI is aware of it, but I don't know why they were not the ones charging him.
Well, I'm glad they erred on the side of safety, to be like, this could be truckloads of militia members, which, by the way, why do we call these guys militias and we call other people gangs? I don't understand. Because these are gangs to me. Let's see here. Here's some of the details. Or even,
dare I say, terrorist groups, right?
Terrorists, domestic terrorists. So here's more details from the story. Around 1 p.m. on Saturday, an official with the Forest Service, the United States Forest Service, federal agency, which is supporting recovery efforts after Hurricane Helene, along with FEMA, sent an urgent message to numerous federal agencies warning that, quote, FEMA has advised all federal responders, Rutherford County, North Carolina, to stand down and evacuate the county immediately. The message stated that it was the National Guard who had come across, quote, trucks of armed militia, saying they were out hunting FEMA. The IMTs, which are incident management teams, have been notified and are coordinating the evacuation of all assigned personnel in that county. That's what the email said. And that email came from a U.S. Forest Service representative. The Rutherford County Sheriff's Office confirmed in a statement that the county's communications center had received a call Saturday, shortly before 1 p.m., warning, quote, that a white male had an assault rifle and made the comment about possibly harming FEMA employees working after the disaster of Hurricane Helene in the Lake Lure and Chimney Rock area. Now, after learning of the call, deputies in the sheriff's office alerted other law enforcement agencies and others helping with relief efforts, which could include the FBI, but it doesn't specifically say that here, with the other agencies helping with relief efforts, and went to where the threat was made, the statement said, and identified the color and type of vehicle that the suspect was driving. After getting additional information, the sheriff's office was able to identify the suspect, William Parsons, 44, of Bostick, North Carolina. So it was one guy, and the call came in that it was one guy. But maybe the guy said, you know, we got tons of guys out here hunting FEMA or something. And so they wanted to, again, err on the side of safety, evacuate everyone from the area, which completely disrupted the disaster relief, the people working to aid this area after Hurricane Helene.
Yeah, and I love the title of this crime you're about to hear. The sheriff's office arrested Parsons later Saturday and charged him with going armed to the terror of the public.
I like
according to the statement. He was armed with a handgun and a rifle, it added. While the initial report said there was, quote, a truckload of militia that was involved, unquote, the statement said, authorities said that they concluded it was determined that Parsons acted alone and there was no truckloads of militia going to Lake Lure. One Forest Service official coordinating the Helene recovery said responders moved to a safe area and that at least some work in the area, which included clearing trees off dozens of damaged and blocked roads to help search and rescue crews, as well as groups delivering supplies, was paused.
So life-saving supplies and clearing roads for life-saving search and rescue crews.
FEMA. Yeah, by Sunday afternoon, personnel were back in place, said the official who spoke on the condition of anonymity.
Yeah, so a 24-hour delay for this one guy threatening to hunt FEMA responders, people trying to help people. The threats were made at a gas station on Route 9 in neighboring Polk County, prompting an attendant there to share concerns with active duty U.S. soldiers who visited. That's what Captain Jamie Keever, a spokesman with the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office, said. The Army reported the incident to law enforcement authorities, who arrested the man Saturday night. Chimney Rock in Rutherford County has become one of the centers of tension and conflict after a rumor spread on social media that government officials plan to seize the devastated village and bulldoze bodies under the rubble. That was all a lie. And authorities and news outlets debunked that assertion, but people still took to social media imploring militias to go after FEMA. A person familiar with FEMA operations said the agency was working out of an abundance of caution, and its teams were operating at fixed locations and secure areas instead of the usual practice of going door to door. So now you've chilled FEMA from being able to fully help in recovery efforts. The individual who spoke on the condition of anonymity given the situation said he and his crew have been clearing roads. Standing down was demoralizing, and it broke the rhythm of their work. It's been about a 51-49 split of residents being, quote, grateful to see us versus go home feds, he said. 51-49. Quote, we were aware of the threats made against FEMA in particular, but federal responders in general. So that's, unfortunately, these rumors, these conspiracy theories, these lies have consequences.
Yeah, and a couple of things to keep in mind. I mean, one, historically, Western North Carolina has been particularly, I wouldn't say left or right, but just very anti-government. I mean, Eric Rudolph, the who was charged and ultimately found and found guilty of some abortion violence, and was on the run in Western North Carolina when he was ultimately found and was getting a great deal of support. It's believed he was getting support from a lot of the local population as he was on the run from federal authorities. So that's sort of like anti-government. Again, it's not particularly, I think now it tends to skew Republican, but I think underlying it is a lot of like anti-government sentiment more than it is Democrat or Republican. But now the reason I think it's skewing Republican is you've got, and what goes unmentioned in so many of these articles, nobody is talking about how Marjorie Taylor Greene is talking about how the U.S. government is controlling the weather and sending hurricanes to devastate these areas on purpose to impact Republican voters. Nobody is talking about Donald Trump's comments that the government wants to see people suffer as a result of these hurricanes. There's a direct correlation between the people who are engaged in this 49% who are like, feds go home, who that belief is being stoked by Donald Trump, by Marjorie Taylor Greene, and others. And we need to stop decoupling those two things.
Right.
This sentiment is there. Rescue and relief efforts are being impacted for a day, literally 24 hours. People are suffering, in fact, because of this belief being advocated for by Donald Trump, by Marjorie Taylor Greene, by the way, I'm willing to bet with metaphysical certainty, the government of Russia on social media, that somehow Joe Biden wants to see you in pain. And they're coming to bulldoze you and your bodies and seize all the stuff and take over. There's something about lithium mine. I mean, it's crazy. It is like Alex Jones InfoWars on the ground in Western North Carolina. And it is the kind of thing that Donald Trump is taking advantage of for political gain. And
something else, Pete, that's missing from these conversations is the fact that Democrats on the ground are going out to make sure that voter registration deadlines in Western North Carolina are extended, that they have more options to vote, even though this is a heavily red area. It is the Democrats going to make sure that all of these people will have access to the ballot box. So that's something else that's missing from this. And it's kind of stunning that, like you said, we aren't decoupling it from this Donald Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, anti-Semitic disinformation, weather controlling BS, but also that it's actually the Democrats that want these folks to, first of all, be safe and secure and get their FEMA benefits and get their federal government benefits and have everything searched and rescued, have the roads cleared, et cetera. But also they want them to be able to vote. And I think that's something else that's kind of missing from a lot of this rhetoric.
Yeah, absolutely. And if go back and you look at Congress and the Republicans' failure to vote for funding for FEMA and a bill this last session, I just time and time again, all these people saying, we need to cut down on the federal government. It's like, all right, well, let's look at the net flows of cash and resources from, coming out of taxation, going out in the form of benefits to the various states from the federal government. And if you lay out the number of counties across the United States, it is overwhelmingly deep red states and counties that are net benefactors of federal aid compared to blue counties and states who are disproportionately putting into that system. So all this, you commie, socialist, Marxist. Well, okay, yeah, until the hurricane slams into Florida and Ron DeSantis is like, hey, give me some of that socialism now. Come on, let's go.
And don't make me go in on the $3 trillion in tax revenue that we get from migrants. So I don't even want to go there. But it all comes from blue states. And it's all, keep your government hands off my Social Security is what this reminds me of. That one woman, and I think it was the 2008 election. So anyway, that's where we're at. We're going to keep sending out positive thoughts to everybody in disaster affected areas, in zones, and we want you to be able to vote. We want you to be able to get the benefits that you need and the relief that you need. And we continue to hope that you do. So thanks to everybody for listening to Clean Up on Aisle 45 this week. Glad to be back from vacation. Again, Pete, thanks for holding down the fort last week and manning the helm for us. And I think you did a wonderful job. I heard the episode while I was on vacation. I listened to it. It was awesome. And of course, the bonus episode was pretty amazing.
If you want the swearing, you can get the back episodes. Click on the Patreon button right now, and you can go hear the swears. It shares, I think, some of, I believe, Vice President Harris in some interview talked about her favorite swear word, beginning with an M and ending in an So there's plenty of that.
Yeah. There's like 25 of those at least. I don't think we got a toll, but maybe we'll put together like a mashup of all the MRFers that you said and just a little count at the bottom. Ding, 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 ding. And we'll see how that goes. But pretty outstanding work, my friend. And I can't wait to take another vacation and leave you in charge. All right, everybody, we'll be back next week. Again, if you want to join and support us, you can head to patreon.com/aisle45pod, and we'll see you next week. Patrons, we'll see you in a couple of days because we do that bonus episode. So we'll talk then. I've been Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Struck.
Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill, with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com. MSW Media.